Now back to politics. Margaret Talev, Bloomberg politics reporter, who's been covering the Democratic race. She's here to weigh in now. So, Margaret, we just heard from Steve Harrigan. Hillary Clinton on her way to this Trayvon Martin Foundation dinner. This is not the kind of dinner, and this is not the kind of thing Hillary Clinton wanted to be doing come May.
Well, she'd love to be campaigning for the general election, but this is actually a really important part of her base in terms of not just the primary election, but in terms of the general election in the fall. Assuming that she is the nominee, she has relied very heavily on not just minority voters, but black women and people affected by gun violence to kind of rally around her and champion her.
Did well with them in South Carolina, through the South, other places
absolutely,
like that.
It's been pivotal, and this is a thank you to them, and it's also an opportunity to go to Florida, which is never a bad idea.
Considering the weather right now, it's not a bad thing. Hillary Clinton, over the past couple of days, has sort of ratcheted up the rhetoric a little bit, saying, I will be the nominee, and the math seems pretty prohibitive to Bernie Sanders. Agreed?
That's right.
All right. So why is Bernie Sanders still in this? What does he want out of this?
He'd like to be the Democratic nominee for president. Well, I mean, really, no. I mean, it's really true. But beyond that, he'd like to be able to influence the party platform and the party agenda going forward.
The Dems have said, all right, we're going to give him various things at the convention, seats on committee, and those kinds of things. That hardly seems like enough for somebody who mounted such a real challenge to who was a runaway frontrunner.
Well, and that really is the conundrum for the Democratic Party. They can't give him much more than that without tugging Clinton too far to the left in position just at the worst time, you know, for the general election. They also really don't want to. The Democratic Party establishment has been so, you know, sort of maligned and insulted by Bernie Sanders all these last months.
In many ways, yeah.
But they understand that they need both him, a couple of his key surrogates, and his supporters, this great number of supporters who are either first time in the process or who are really liberal Democrats who've been disaffected with her.
Feeling the burn.
Right, they need her. They need those folks either to vote for her or at least not to vote for Donald Trump, and that's really the conundrum.
Yeah, we even saw in places like West Virginia exit polls showing that 40+% of folks who voted for Bernie Sanders would vote for Trump, not vote for Clinton in a general election. You brought up an interesting point in terms of how far to the left Hillary Clinton has been pulled by Bernie Sanders. You always see folks jog to the middle after the primary, but this isn't a jog. This is going to have to be a dogleg right to the center for Hillary Clinton. Can she do it? Or is it just an impossible feat, you think?
Well, sure. She's been doing this for 3 decades. This is her husband perfected the art form of triangulation, but it is important how she positions herself, and many in the party have been surprised to see her move rhetorically and to some extent policy-wise on trade, on a number of other things, and rhetorically in terms of the way she talks about income inequality. I expect, just as you do, that she will kind of reposition herself toward the center in terms of policy, but in terms of rhetoric and how she talks about it, she has to find a way to keep those people who have been more engaged emotionally by Bernie Sanders in the polls.
Bernie Sanders has been running on real issues, and you point out Bill Clinton. He is so far different economically, and his presidency was so far different economically than what it seems as though the base of the Democratic Party wants.
Right, and it's a real question they haven't resolved yet. She'd like to be able to use him in the campaign, particularly in that sort of Appalachia Rust Belt cross-section between Ohio and Pennsylvania, because Bill Clinton still inspires confidence in a lot of those folks. But are those the folks in the other states who represent the future of the Democratic Party and are going to want to turn out? And it's really, the polling's very early now. Just because polling shows Bernie Sanders ahead of Trump vis-a-vis Clinton, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it is a clue to the challenges that she's going to face.
Yeah, a lot of questions in terms of whether Sanders has really been vetted or people are just sort of answering poll questions willy-nilly. All right, Margaret Talev, great reporting from Bloomberg. We'll check in with you as the campaign continues.
Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.